I'm sure you've all heard it a million times before. Nobody's buying sedans in America. Well, nobody told Toyota because last year they sold over 309,000 Camrys, making this not just America's best-selling sedan, it's also America's best-selling hybrid. Some manufacturers obscure the hybrid numbers or just don't talk about them at all, but for the Camry, we know exactly how many hybrids they're selling because every Camry is a hybrid for the 2025 model year, and every model is rated for at least 44 miles per gallon. So if you want America's favorite sedan, America's favorite hybrid, and one of the most efficient vehicles you can buy in North America today that runs on gasoline, you might want to check out a Camry because the most efficient version of this is rated for over 50 miles per gallon. It's territory not that long ago occupied exclusively by the Prius. When Toyota announced that every Camry in the US was going to have a hybrid system under the hood, I wasn't surprised. But I was curious to see what this would do to Camry sales. And we now have an answer. Camry sales were definitely up in 2024. Now, we can't talk about the Camry without talking about the other two hybrid options in this segment, the Accord and the Sonata. And maybe we should talk a little bit about the segment, because this, of course, has been shrinking over time. We no longer have a mid-size sedan from Ford. The Malibu is going to sail off into the sunset soon, and it's been a while since we've had a mid-size sedan from the Chrysler group of companies as well. So part of the reason Camry sales are over 300,000 is because there are fewer options than there have been in the past. And that's perhaps why this generation of Camry has to be said in air quotes, because this is not a clean sheet redesign for the Camry. It's a substantially modified Camry from the last generation with a new nose, new interior, and of course the standard hybrid system under the hood. And that's why the general dimensions are not too far off the previous generation. This is a little bit narrower than the Sonata or the Accord, but it has the latest Toyota design up front, where we have a much less controversial grille, I think, than some Toyotas of the past. The grille elements sort of blend into the side, and it does change based on the trim you're looking at. We get a little bit of an homage to the other recent Toyota models with this black ducted section right there, LED headlights over here with LED turn signals, and these are projector LEDs. In my opinion, these are some of the best headlights in this segment. Now, obviously, giving the Camry a complete clean sheet redesign would have been fantastically expensive, but I'm disappointed that they didn't go in that direction, because this long hood profile and the long overhang are simply not needed for the drivetrain that's living exclusively under this hood. And if they had tightened those dimensions up, they could have given us a larger and more accommodating passenger compartment behind for a vehicle with the same relative length. I think they could also have afforded to give us a squarer profile in the back for better rear seat headroom, because we have the hybrid system up front, so the fuel economy would still have been fantastic. A little bit lower, perhaps with a squarer roofline, but still quite good. They didn't go in that direction, however. So dimensionally, the wheelbase and the exterior dimensions are almost exactly the same as the pre-redesigned model. 193.5 inches long, making this about 2.5 inches shorter than a Honda Accord, although they have a wheelbase that's basically the same. So the Accord's overhangs are just a little bit longer than the Camry's. The Sonata, it's almost exactly the same size as this. Now today we're taking a look at an XSE model, so we have not just the sporty wheels, which we'll take a look at in just a second, but also the two-tone paint job that you see here with the black roofline. I definitely think this is the most attractive Camry I've seen in quite some time. The Hyundai, the Honda, and the Toyota use very different hybrid technologies, but interestingly, they all weigh about the same, around 3,500 pounds for most trims. But we definitely see a difference when it comes to the tire and wheel packages. The Camry starts out with the skinniest tires, and that's definitely how we get up over 50 miles per gallon. You'll find 205 width tires in the base Camry model, but this XSE trim, it actually has surprisingly aggressive tires for a mainline hybrid. 235 width Bridgestone Turanza tires. These are not the most aggressive tire out there, don't get me wrong, but for a family sedan that has a hybrid system under the hood, it's a pretty decent tire. It's also surprisingly low profile. This is a 40 series tire on these 19-inch wheels that you see here. The Accord, it starts out with 225 width tires, goes up to 235s, very similar sizes to the Camry. The Sonata, on the other hand, those are skinny in every hybrid model, 215 width only for both of the hybrid trims that are available currently. Since this is an XSE trim, we have this black lip spoiler on top of the trunk lid. That definitely goes with the two-tone paint scheme on this model. We then have a black bar that connects the two taillight modules with one another, with Camry spelled out nice and wide across there. The taillights themselves are full LEDs, so LED turn signals and LED backup lights, which would actually be in this section right over here. They're definitely slimmer than before and really go with the sleeker lines up front. We have twin exhaust tips down at the bottom, and perhaps the silliest badge I have ever seen on a hybrid. This is something that Toyota's been doing a lot lately. The circle here is beyond zero, the same badging that they're using on their full electric vehicles and their hydrogen cars, even though a hybrid is literally before zero. Toyota sells a number of different hybrid systems in the US these days, but the one in the Camry is their classic hybrid system that's been around for decades. And it's well known for not only efficiency, but also incredible reliability, because mechanically, it's very simple. On this side of the engine bay, we have a single planetary gear set, 2 motor generator units, and on that side, we have a 4-cylinder engine. Everything works together to give you 225 horsepower up front. If you choose the all-wheel drive option, there's another motor that goes in the back, and that brings the power up a little bit to 232 horsepower. 0 to 60, it's about the same though, because it's just compensating for the extra weight on board. Fuel efficiency will range between 44 and 51 miles per gallon combined. The mechanical simplicity of this system is the reason that it's so reliable, because we don't have any clutches, any bands, there isn't even a reverse gear. If you want to go backwards, it simply spins one motor backwards and the car moves in reverse. And that makes it definitely different than the other options we should talk about. The Accord and the Sonata use 2-liter 4-cylinder engines, but they use them in very different ways. The Accord is a serial hybrid below about 45 miles an hour, so the engine is generating power thanks to a connected generator, and that's sending it to the traction motor electrically, and that 181 horsepower motor is all that is powering the vehicle forward at most speeds, especially full throttle speeds. So depending on how you want to look at it, it's either 204 or 181 horsepower. We'll get into that in the drive section. The big thing to know is that the Accord only has one fixed ratio that it can engage between the engine and the wheels, and that will engage at around 45 miles an hour. So on the highway, if you're going about 60 miles an hour, your fuel efficiency is going to be pretty good, and you should get between that 44 and 48 mpg rating in that model. If, however, you're going 75 miles an hour, like many people do out on the highway, especially in states like Texas, where speed limits are really high, this is going to be significantly more efficient, because this has an infinite number of mechanical ratios between the engine and the front wheels, supported by that planetary gear set there. So it can send about 80% of its power mechanically to the front wheels at any speed and at any RPM. Splitting the difference a little bit is the hybrid system in the Sonata, which has a much more traditional feel because it has an actual 6-speed automatic transmission on this side of the engine bay and a single electric motor. That gives you 192 horsepower combined and 47 miles per gallon in both trims where the hybrid system is offered. Keep in mind again though, the skinny tires that we find on that Sonata. If you're doing a lot of highway driving, the Sonata and the Camry are going to be notably more efficient than the Accord. If you're doing a lot of city driving, they're all going to be relatively equal, but the Sonata is not going to be as smooth as the Accord or the Camry because of that traditional automatic transmission. On the other hand, if you like the way an automatic transmission feels, you might want to go that way because it's the only one with a real automatic. I find the design of the front seats to be quite comfortable for my body shape, although I wish we had 4-way adjustable lumbar for shorter or taller drivers, but this 2-way lumbar is positioned really nicely for me and my height. We have a manual tilt telescopic steering column with a pretty large range of motion, but the passenger seat does not have the adjustable lumbar support that the driver's seat gets. We also don't have a lot of headroom in most trims, because if you get any of the models with the moonroof, you lose a decent amount of headroom up front, and I have only about 3/4 of an inch of room left, even though this seat is all the way down in its tracks. In my opinion, this is something of a self-fulfilling prophecy for sedan designs. Customers gravitate towards crossovers because they want more room, meaning that the customers left in the sedan segment are interested in sportier driving dynamics and sportier looks, so the sedans become lower and sleeker and sportier, and then the crossovers get even more shoppers, really narrowing that market down for the sedan time after time after time. And I think that's what we're seeing in all of the mid-size sedans. They just don't have as much headroom as they used to. You'll find the most headroom in the Hyundai Sonata, but the Camry's not bad. I can actually put my head back there to that head restraint. My hair is definitely brushing the ceiling, but I don't have to crane my neck awkwardly. One big advantage to the Camry, of course, is the width. So if you're comparing this to something like a RAV4 or a CR-V, the back seat is going to be significantly wider, and the seats themselves, I think are more comfortable than the design that we find in most crossovers. It's also going to be lower to the ground. So if you do have kids that are getting in or out, keep in mind it's going to be easier for them to hop in the back themselves because the seats are closer to the ground and the step-in height is lower as well. On the other hand, you just don't get as much ground clearance. On paper, it would look like the Accord has the most legroom in the segment, but in real-world terms, I think the Sonata actually is a bit roomier all the way around. I think it has to do with the way that Honda is measuring front seat room, or just the positioning of the front seats for me and my height. You get more room in the back if I'm sitting in the front of the Sonata versus the front of the Accord. The outboard seating positions get latch anchors, but we have these removable plastic doors that are likely to get lost, and the anchor, even though it's really easy to find, is actually a little close to the surface. That has the unintended consequence of making it a bit more difficult to install a rear-facing seat like this, because you are going to have to really work at those straps in order to get that seat properly tight and appropriately installed. But there is just about enough room. It's a bit difficult to see, but over here on the driver's side, we have about an inch of clearance between that rear-facing seat. This one is rated for rear-facing up to 40 pounds, but it's about the same size as some of those extended rear-facing models that will let you rear-face all the way up to 60 pounds. In our 24-inch roller bag test, we were barely able to squeeze 5 24-inch roller bags back here. That is a stellar showing, but there is something you should know. You're gonna have to really be careful with these hinges because they do impinge on the cargo, and you have to kind of squish them in manually in order to really close the trunk lid. Otherwise, your bags may skew to the side and get hit by that trunk hinge. But still, 5 bags, especially this silver one in this position, is definitely impressive. Below the load floor, which has a handy hook to let you hang it like that, we find a foam divider with your tire iron and your jack, and below that we find an actual honest-to-goodness temporary spare tire. I suspect if you wanted to put a full-size spare in there, you probably could, but you'd have to take out that foam divider. Many of you have asked for the return of the exclusive trunk cover index, so here we go. I'm going to give this 7 out of 10 points. We have to deduct points because we only have latches for the rear seat backs back here in the trunk, not inside as well. I do like it in both places. We also don't have any sort of helper handle to help you close the trunk lid, leaving you to claw at the outside and scratch that paintwork up. And we don't have hidden hinges, which would really improve the cargo practicality, as you saw in our roller bag test. So again, 7 out of 10 points. On the inside of this XSE trim, we don't have a digital rearview mirror, but we do have the HomeLink buttons right there. This is the forward view camera for the safety systems, controls for the power moonroof, LED map lights right there. We don't have slide to the side sun visors, but we do have sun visor extensions for the driver and the front passenger. They pull out right like that. We also have vanity mirrors behind that little sliding door with LED lights above. The panoramic moonroof is quite large, but it doesn't go all the way back there to the rear passengers' heads. You can see that it stops just before that head restraint in the back. Speaking of head restraints, we have two-way adjustable head restraints for the driver and front passenger and height adjustable shoulder belts. And as you can see, we have a very, very red interior in this model. I really appreciate the fact that Toyota is giving us exciting color options in so many vehicles. They have a decent number of models in their lineup with this same red leather upholstery. I don't know if I would buy it, but I'm really glad that it exists. These front seats are both heated and ventilated, and you can see that the perforations have kind of a nifty pattern to them where the pattern or the holes actually get larger and smaller, and that's what gives it this particular vibe. We find that same pattern going on the front door panels where we find a reasonable percentage of soft touch materials. The upper section of the doors and dashboard are soft touch. Of course, the lower portion of the door that's made from a hard plastic to help improve durability, for instance, right down there around that bottle holder. Now, the design of the dashboard is a little bit controversial, most notably the shiny black accents and what kind of looks like an HVAC air grill, I guess you could say here, kind of a louvered effect going on there. The air vent is integrated into that. It's just that portion right there on the passenger side. The rest of this is just a styling trim component. We have an upper section of the dashboard that is soft touch and squishy, and you can see that we have the optional JBL audio speakers right there. I like this JBL audio system better than the mid-level system that we find in the Accord, but I think the Accord's top-end Bose system and the top-end system that we find in the Sonata are a little bit better than the system here in the Camry. On the other hand, I like the software in the dashboard of the Camry a little bit better than what we find in the Accord. In the Accord, we have a smaller screen standard. A larger screen is standard in the Camry, but the top-end screens, they're the same size. On the other hand, this has the connected navigation and other connected features standard, whereas you'll only find the Google Assistant system in the very top-end trim of the Accord. Here's where I should plug our podcast. So if you haven't subscribed to the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast, be sure and do that on your favorite podcasting platform. And you can hear us talk about things like are hybrids finally mainstream? That's quite germane to the video that we are recording today. If you want to find us on YouTube, you can also find us over there and watch the podcast where Travis and I discuss all the latest news and, importantly, also answer viewer questions. So if you want to send us viewer questions or comments or feedback, you can send it to hey@autobuyersguide.com. You can also send us voice memos. We love voice memos or voicemail messages. There's actually a line down there at the bottom of your screen, so you can send them to those locations right down there, and you will hear yourself on the podcast. We don't really have too much time to do it in normal episodes, but that's where that feedback is going to happen. So down here we find controls for the dual zone automatic climate control, heated and ventilated seats. I love the fact that we have these toggle controls because they're really easy to locate and easy to use. Big air vents below that. We then have a USB input for the system, so you can CarPlay or Android Auto wired or wirelessly, 2 USB-C charge ports, a Qi wireless charging mat right there, a kind of traditional console shifter over here, drive mode buttons, Eco, Normal, and Sport, an EV mode button, auto brake hold button, big cup holders there, and a big center armrest that opens to reveal a pretty decently sized storage area. One advantage to an all-wheel drive system is that there is no drive shaft running through the vehicle, but you can see that we do still have a reasonable hump there in the back. Obviously, part of that is for the exhaust, but part of it is probably also because they didn't give the Camry's platform a complete redesign. Let's go over here and check out the glove compartment. It is kind of a slot-style glove compartment. It's a little bit difficult to see, but you would not be able to fit a tablet computer inside. Here's this big bundle of books right there. It's not as big as I would like either. On the driver's side, we find a full-color head-up display, soft-touch upper section of the dashboard there as well, and then the latest Toyota full LCD instrument cluster. I don't like the design quite as much as the design of the Honda Accord's instrument cluster, but functionality-wise, this is definitely more configurable. We have a lot of different choices to choose from, and you can, if I click this little button down, you can change what's going on in each of these 3 sections of the display. And the look changes a little bit as well, depending on exactly what you're doing in the system. So for instance, if I go into sport mode, you notice that we get animated graphics there, a little car pulls up, the display changes, there's the normal mode, and then we get the eco mode. The steering wheel has a pretty familiar Toyota look to it. We have the driver monitoring camera right there up top, paddles on the back because it does imitate some gear ratios. We then have controls for that multifunction LCD cluster, volume up, down, voice command button over there, mode button for the infotainment system, track forward, backward. I am sad that these commonly used buttons are all shiny black plastic because they are starting to show scratches already. Above that, we have buttons that show their wear a little bit less, and these are used for the cruise control, the lane keeping assistance system, etc. There's some additional buttons to the left of the steering column. This is where we find the 360-degree camera button, auto high beams, the dimmer, trunk button, etc. Now, the 360-degree camera system is the latest Toyota animated model where you can drag your car around. So you can see we have that animated position there. You can also move around. And then it even has the undercar calculated image if we were driving along. So as you can see, if I put the vehicle in reverse and back up, it's going to be using the cameras to show you what you have driven over. That's definitely a really cool feature, but as you can see, it is a relatively small image in this horizontal display. Versus the previous Camry hybrid, 0 to 60 times have definitely improved. This model went 0 to 60 in 6.9 seconds. That's quicker than the Sonata hybrid, but not quite as fast as the Accord hybrid. You might be wondering, how is that possible since we have more power in this model than we have in the Accord, especially considering that the Accord in a 0 to 60 run is only giving you 181 horsepower because the traction motor connected to the wheels is rated for 181. If you want to know more about the Honda Accord 2-motor hybrid system, I have a complete video on that. Well, I think the answer is we have a lot of torque out of that Honda Accord hybrid motor, and due to its design, it drives and feels a little bit more like an EV. We also have slightly lower curb weight in some of those models, and everything put together just scoots that car 0 to 60 a little bit quicker. It's also a slightly more aggressive final drive ratio, I believe, in that Accord. Now, this feels a bit more like a CVT. So if you want something that drives kind of like an EV, that's going to be the Accord. If you want something that drives sort of like a regular car, that's going to be the Sonata Hybrid thanks to its 6-speed automatic transmission. And if you don't mind something that feels a little bit between worlds, but certainly a little CVT-like, then check out the Camry, especially if you want the most fuel economy. In our 60 to 0 stopping distance test, it took 122 feet for this vehicle to stop from 60 to 0, although keep in mind it is a little damp outside. It has finally stopped raining out here for a brief moment, but the road surface was not exactly dry, and it was about 40 degrees Fahrenheit this morning when we were doing our 60 to 0 stopping tests, so it's probably going to be a little bit shorter in reality. These Bridgestone Turanza tires are not the most aggressive tire in this segment, but they do a pretty decent job road holding for the Camry. And that's where I'm going to give handling just a slight drop below the Accord. I'm going to give this one an A-. The Accord has a slight edge when it comes to suspension tuning and steering feel, but the Camry does very, very well. On the other hand, remember that the base versions of the Camry are going to have exquisitely skinny tires. 205 width tires in a car this size that weighs 3,500 pounds, that's a really skinny tire, and you're going to notice a pretty big difference in terms of handling from the bottom end on up to the top end trim of the Camry. In this generation, Toyota has really turned over a new leaf, and this is significantly more dynamic than any generation of the Camry has been in the past. On a rougher road like the gravel road that we're on here, the ride quality is surprising given the 40 series tires that we find on this model. I'm going to give the Camry an A, but that A is focused more on the mainstream trims that don't have the 19-inch wheels, and ride quality is going to be even better there. But compared against the top-end versions of the Honda Accord Hybrid, I would actually say the Camry is just better riding all the way around. So if you live on a rougher road, or you're really concerned about those longer road trips and comfort on freeway expansion joints, speed bumps, etc., you probably want to check out the Camry. I think the Sonata also does a good job. I'd say it's a pretty decent equal to the model that I'm driving here. The Camry all-wheel drive is quite unique in this segment, not just because it's an all-wheel drive option, but because it uses an electric motor in the back. That means that it's not going to feel quite like a traditional all-wheel drive vehicle, not like the last generation Camry all-wheel drive, which was a mechanical all-wheel drive system. With an all-wheel drive setup like this, you'll still get a decent amount of front wheel slip on ice, on snow, etc., but you'll have traction in the back that you won't get in an Accord Hybrid or a Sonata Hybrid because they don't offer all-wheel drive at all. Because of the size of the rear motor, it's not terribly large, you will never get a rear power bias feel like you can get sometimes in certain Volvo plug-in hybrids or sometimes in some of the Hybrid Max systems that we find from Toyota in, say, the Crown or the Grand Highlander, etc. But it does make the regular Camry feel a little bit more engaging out on your favorite winding road because it does power the rear a little bit, and in a corner like this, if you floor it a bit, you will notice that the rear end actually feels a little bit more settled, and the weight balance is a little bit more balanced in that all-wheel drive Camry. You also don't get much of a fuel economy penalty, to be perfectly honest. It's 2 to 3 miles per gallon in real-world driving. That's not a huge difference when we're talking about fuel economy that's this high. But before we get into that, let's talk about cabin noise. We measured 72 decibels in here at 50 miles an hour, making this quieter than the average compact crossover. So if you're trying to debate mid-size sedan versus compact crossover, they're about the same price. This is going to be better handling, it's going to be more efficient, and it's going to be quieter on the inside. Generally speaking, more fun as well. But efficiency is going to be the biggest difference. The RAV4 Hybrid is quite efficient, but this one is EP rated for 7 miles per gallon better than a RAV4 Hybrid. And of course, if you get the base version of the Camry, that's rated for 11 miles per gallon better than a RAV4. And in real world driving, this is going to be better than the RAV4, especially out on the open highway, because aerodynamics play a big part in highway fuel efficiency. And if you are going 70, 75 miles an hour, there's no two ways about it. This is simply more aerodynamic than a RAV4, and it's going to be more efficient. Over our week of mixed driving, we've been averaging 46 miles per gallon, and that includes going up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass every day, driving on roads right like this, 0 to 60 testing, etc. This is a really efficient sedan. Also really efficient is the Sonata Hybrid. The last time we tested it, we got very similar fuel economy ratings to this model, but keep in mind the tires are skinnier on that model, 215s versus 235s. If you stuck equally sized tires in that Sonata, you'll probably get a little bit below the fuel economy in this particular model. The Sonata really excels in steady state highway travel thanks to that 6-speed automatic transmission, because there are multiple gear ratios it can choose for that mechanical connection between the engine and the wheels, and we don't have that in the Accord Hybrid. In the Accord hybrid, it's kind of like having a manual transmission car with only fifth gear. And I would be talking about a 6-speed manual transmission car with just fifth gear, because there's no really high gear for better fuel economy at speeds over about 60 miles an hour or so. It engages around 42 to 45 miles per hour, and at 60 to 70 miles per hour, we're talking about higher engine RPMs than we find in this model or in the Sonata, and that's just why the fuel efficiency numbers aren't as good. This is not just our testing. You can check out other outlets that do 75 mile per hour testing, and you will notice that there's about a 15 to 20% difference between highway fuel efficiency in the real world in this and in the Accord. And by the real world, I am talking about those higher speeds. If you live in an area with relatively low speeds, or you just like driving 60 miles an hour, there's not going to be much difference. But if, like most people, you're going 72 to 75 miles an hour on the open highway, especially in a road trip, then you might want to lean towards the Hyundai or the Toyota. When I heard that the Camry was getting a hybrid system standard, I had expected some pretty steep price increases at the bottom, but we didn't in fact see that. It starts at $29,835 for 2025, including destination. But we did see some price growth at the upper end of the scale on the Camry, and it is one of the most expensive options in this segment if you get one fully loaded. Although there are some things you can get in the Camry that you cannot get in the competition, most notably a hybrid with all-wheel drive. That is uniquely Camry, although it's not the only all-wheel drive option here. You can get all-wheel drive in the Sonata, the K5, the Legacy of course has its standard, and you can get all-wheel drive in the Altima. You just can't combine all-wheel drive with the hybrid in the Sonata, and the Accord doesn't offer all-wheel drive at all. Since there aren't too many mid-sized sedans in America at the moment, and we're going to get 2 fewer next year, let's just roll through really quickly the ones that are dead first, starting with the Chevy Malibu. We all know it's sailing off into the sunset. Currently, it is wicked inexpensive. So if you want the most value in terms of spaciousness, and if you could sell sedans by the foot, you're going to get a lot of value in the Malibu because it's big, it's really cheap. Not only is the MSRP lower than average in this segment, you'll be getting $4,000 to $5,000 off in most places. Unfortunately, the Malibu hybrid has long since gone away. I'm really sad about that. I think that GM should have kept that hybrid system around because functionally it was about the same hybrid technology that we find in the Camry hybrid and the Prius, just with a slightly different arrangement of the planetary power split system and the motors. Next up is the Subaru Legacy. This is also dead sedan walking, which I think is even sadder than the Malibu because it's a really good deal and it's a really good sedan. It has a relatively low starting price. It has standard all-wheel drive, decent fuel economy, comfy seats. The back seats are a little bit smaller than you might like because of the packaging of the all-wheel drive system in that boxer engine, etc., but it's a really solid option. On the other hand, it's easy to see why the Legacy is going goodbye because the Outback, basically the Legacy station wagon, is one of the best-selling Subarus around, and Subaru finally decided that it was time to kill off the Legacy and just sell the model that sells better. So by all indications, Legacy is dead. We're going to be getting a new Outback very soon, and we're not going to get a sedan version of that Outback. At least not for now, but they could always change their minds in the future. It just seems relatively unlikely. Then of course we have the Nissan Altima. Also a cheap option in this segment. The interior feels certainly more modern than the Chevy Malibu, so if you're looking for the ultimate lease price mid-size sedan, they lease really cheap, lots of deals going on there. There is all-wheel drive, but no hybrid system, and I think that the interior electronics are certainly a step above the Malibu. The Malibu is definitely a blast from the past. It has the oldest, last generation version of GM's infotainment system. The dashboard certainly looks like it's from a different era. Definitely not from a different era, though, is the refreshed Sonata and, of course, the new Kia K5. Let's talk about these sort of together because they're basically the same vehicle under the skin, but there's some important differences if you're really trying to debate between the two. Personally, I like the styling on the Sonata, but the K5 is really aggressively styled, and I know a lot of people really like it too. All-wheel drive is limited to certain trims only in the Sonata and K5 for some reason. You can't get it across the line, which has always struck me as an unusual choice. Also unusual, the hybrid system is only available on the Sonata. There's no K5 hybrid at the moment for some reason. The N-Line, that's only on the Sonata. There's no corollary in the Kia lineup, and that would be the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder turbo engine with just under 300 horsepower and the dual-clutch transmission. If you want the most fun in this segment, I would argue that that is now the Sonata N-Line. We get a lot of power, really great performance out of that DCT. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and some people don't like DCTs or any maintenance worries about them, etc. But if you're looking for fun, that's definitely it. If you're looking for fuel economy, the Sonata does really, really well with that 6-speed hybrid system. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but if you want your hybrid to drive like a regular sedan, then you probably want the Sonata because it does have a traditional 6-speed automatic transmission. The last thing to know about these twinsies is that I do like the Hyundai Kia infotainment system better than what we find in the Accord or the Camry. I like the style, I like the functionality, it's snappy, it's responsive, it's easy to pair things and easy to find settings in the system. I also like the fact that the two screens are tied together in that one, they call it a sheet of glass, but it's not glass and it's not one screen. It's two screens sort of jammed together on that binnacle in the dash. Personally, I like the look. I know not everybody does. And that brings us along to the Accord, obviously the toughest and most direct competitor for the Camry. So let's take a deeper dive into this. I think the Accord has really solid good looks, nice clean lines. I love the rear end design of the Accord in this generation. The front end, I think it's attractive, but I could see that the Sonata or the K5 might be more your thing. But for me, the rear end of the Accord is where it's all at. Now, the Accord has some downsides that you should be aware of. There's no panoramic moonroof for some reason in this generation. I think that was a miss for the Accord. We also get smaller screens in the base models, and you won't get exactly the same infotainment software across the line. As we see in other Honda models, if you want the Google connected software, you have to get the top end Accord. And I think that's a bit of a bummer because that feature I wish was just standard in the Accord. I also wish that the bigger infotainment system was just standard in the Accord because you will find bigger screens in basically all the competition for most of the trims. If we're just doing comparative and contrasting trims here, I think that was a bit of a misstep from Honda, but it is something they can address because they have the bigger screen, they have the different software, they could just push it further down the lineup, and who knows, they might do that some point soon. The Accord is definitely the more aggressive option when it comes to driving dynamics. It's quicker 0 to 60, it handles better, it stops shorter, it feels more engaging than the Camry. And in city driving especially, it's going to feel a little bit more like an electric car because, as I said, it basically is one in that serial hybrid mode below 40 some odd miles an hour. The bigger issue for the Accord is highway fuel economy. If you're going 70 or 75 miles an hour, you're going to get notably better fuel economy in either the Camry or the Sonata. So it's really going to depend on what kind of driving you do as to whether or not you'll notice much of a difference. For a lot of folks out there, you're not going to notice much of a difference between the Camry and the Accord in terms of fuel economy. You will notice slightly lower fuel economy in the Accord, of course, but it's not going to be a world of difference. If, however, you live in states where you get 80, 85 mile an hour speed limits and you are driving 80 to 85 miles an hour or faster in Texas, you're not going to get the fuel economy on the EPA sticker in anything, but you are going to be closer in either the Sonata or the Camry. If my money were on the line, here's what I would do. If I was looking for a base model, I would probably go for either the Sonata or the Camry. I do think the Sonata's a little bit more comfortable than the Camry. The Camry is obviously really, really fuel efficient also. Two things to keep in mind. The smaller screens in the base Accord and the different software, it's just not my thing. I would probably stick with those other options. On the other hand, if you're looking at the very top end trims, then I would probably lean towards the Accord because it's going to be more fun to drive. We do have the big screen. We have the Google connected system, which I really like in that model as well. And it's, again, it's just more fun. It's not going to have some of the creature comforts if you think these are essential that you will find in the others, like the panoramic moonroof. I also like the interior color options better in the competition. Honda has really gone for a very monochromatic palette, and we do find lighter and airier interiors and just different colors available, especially in the Sonata, where we find probably the widest color palette. And then, of course, we have that really red interior in the Camry, if that's your thing. And this is one of the few vehicles out there where you can combine red on the outside and red on the inside. So if you just really love red, then you can get a Camry with red everywhere. So let me know, which would you pick? Would you go for Camry? Would you go for Accord? Would you go for Sonata? I think K5 is a little too polarizing looks-wise for me. I think I like it functionality-wise. Obviously, it's basically the same thing as the Sonata. For me, the difference there is mainly the aesthetics on the K5. I'm still trying to get used to it. Maybe I could, but it's a little adventurous for me, shall I say. Legacy is sailing off into the sunset. Malibu is joining it. And Altima, poor Altima, at least it's really, really cheap. Let me know what you think about that. See all of you later.